All right, we're live. Let's check how that 30-minute Bulldog's doing on ES. Picture perfect. Coming right up to the 200 EMA on the 30-minute. Around 4,600. Literally one of the cleanest Bulldogs I've ever seen. Double pivot Bulldog too. There was a pivot on the first leg and a pivot on the second leg and a pivot on the back. Like, it's disgusting. And you had a pivot on the head. Jesus. This is a 4-pivot Bulldog. Literally every section of the Bulldog had a pivot. Putting in a new pivot here on ES around 45.85. It's going for a small break here. I don't think I've ever seen a 4-pivot Bulldog. That's pretty damn clean. Snow is up almost 14% on good earnings. Definitely helped that it sold off so hard yesterday. It was pretty easy to buy it up. A lot of the data server stocks are trying to come back after that nasty sell-off. PayPal up 4%. It's kind of annoying. Right before we got our weekly 200 test. I said I was going to front run it a little bit too. I was going to front run probably like 175, somewhere around there. It went down to 179. So it's front running a little too much. Sell signal coming in on ES, but it's very far above VWAP. So VWAP is not assisting you here. Same with the sell signal that came in earlier. You would have ignored that. As far as the strategy goes, you got a buy signal on the open. And then you got another buy signal off the bounce of VWAP. You could have taken that sell that broke through VWAP. It did give you 10 points. But not the strongest. Hey, Vicky, Peter, Dariana, and Ogars. What's going on, guys? Space is getting some volume here. What's going on with Space? Little spike on Space coming in. CCL actually did pretty well today, the cruise line. Thing's been getting hammered all year. Looks like all indexes today are trading above VWAP, so pretty healthy. VWAP is also ascending too. It's not just a sideways VWAP. VIX is trying to bottom out a little bit. Seems like there is a support kind of around that 28, 27 area. But definitely not as strong as it was yesterday when it pushed in at 32. If it gets back below these highs that it made in May and September, it would look pretty good. Get back down to like the 25 area, 22 area. SPY probably go on a nice little run. For now, it's a little scary. Anything above 20 is a little scary. And we're already at 28. Yeah, it's funny, man. They're pushing the Omicron variant more than the Delta variant, but the Delta variant is more severe from what I heard. Seems like they'd push the Delta one a little more, but you know, you gotta have a new variant to scare people. If you keep pushing the same old variant, it doesn't scare people anymore. Notice how, like I said, this sell signal here is too far above VWAP. The buyers are pretty strong. So those sell signals you don't really want to take immediately. You want to wait for some kind of confirmation, maybe a break of support, um, really anything, any support from your indicators. But if it's just giving you a sell signal on consolidation, it's mostly just because it's ranging, not because it's actually bearish. Like this is not bearish, this is ranging, same thing here. Following the strategy, you want to be respecting VWAP. So like this buy is very strong, this buy is very strong as well. Even this sell right here is very strong. That was pre-market though. So unless you traded pre-market, you wouldn't have got that. Hey, Zeta. Agars, you said they're fighting for host. You get Omicron as dominant variant and you are safe for now. Oh, you mean the viruses are fighting over the host? Yeah, the pivots will always be different based on the exchange because the pivots are heavily dependent on volume. They're not all dependent on volume, but they do rely on volume. So every exchange has different volume, so we'll have different pivots. The pivots on, what is this, FTX, are around 58.1 and 52.7. Those are the two main pivots. Where are the pivots at on Binance? Let's take a look. Binance is at 56.9 and 52.7. So the 52.7 one lines up. This one is a little bit lower. I actually prefer FTX on this one because it's being respected a lot more on those wicks. It's like one candle later, I think, on FTX. Yeah, it's one candle later. That's interesting though, because this one's being respected too. It's being respected on the downside, so it's kind of stuck between both these pivots. 56.8 and 58.1. What has some really good pivots, which is very strange because it's not really traded that widely, is Bitstamp. Bitstamp usually has good pivots. Yeah, so the Bitstamp pivot lines up with the FTX pivot. Like, look at these pivots back here on Bitstamp. Beautiful. Gave you that perfect bounce. Definitely keep an eye on the Bitstamp ones. No weekly ones on Bitstamp. What about monthly? No monthly either. But if we look at, I think it's FTX. Yeah, look at FTX. We have this monthly pivot here at around 57.7, and we closed just barely below it last month in November. And now we kind of have a little bit of weakness on that retest. So based on the monthly, it's not looking too good. It's also a bear div too. It's also a tweezer top. So the long-term chart definitely does not look very good. Yeah, let me take a look at Apple, see what's going on. Looks like it's going for a gap fill. You have the gap at what, 164.5? It might go for that gap fill. Disgusting candle. Gap down heavily on news and then recovered the entire sell-off. As long as it stays above the pivot above 161, doesn't look too bad. Probably go for a gap fill. And then the daily has already hit 4 of our targets. We only have 1 target left, and that's 177. You could target 173, 172-ish. You could also target 168 again. Yeah, this is pretty strong. Just taking this little short-term impulse, it's already hit 4 of our targets. The only thing I'd be worried about is if it filled the gap and then it started selling off again. But it looks like it's going to go for the entire gap fill. Daily pivot still showing on ES, so if we close like this, it will close the first daily pivot since the COVID bottom. What do I think about? Is that CRISPR? Yeah, CRISPR. Pretty bearish if you can't reclaim the 200 EMA. You're failing the 200 for the first time ever, because it's the first time you made the 200 on the weekly, around 79. So if you fail that and close below it in about, what, the rest of today and then tomorrow, it looks pretty bad. You do have a little bit of support, which you are bouncing off of, is this pivot right here. So you have a pivot around 72.55, and we have a pivot around 92, another one around 92, so kind of a double pivot. So I'd say if you reclaim the 200, probably go back to these pivots. If you lose this pivot, there's not a whole lot of support below you, to be honest. Because most of the support would be right here, and you're going to be failing that. So it might push it back down to like the 55 area, 55, 60. It's on a monthly pivot too, monthly pivot, as well as the 50 on the monthly. So it does have a lot of support right here, but it has to bounce here. It has to bounce above like 70. Get below 70, you're not looking too good. So now this sell signal is getting a little bit of confirmation because you put in the sell signal. It's basically just in a range, so you can't immediately trust the sell signal. But then we tried to push up, and we put in a lower high. And now we're also putting in a lower low. So you're getting a little bit of confirmation here. Not that much. It's still not the greatest signal. But it is at least showing you some signs of weakness. Like right here, you can see that high being tested. And then right here, you can see the the low being broken. And for exact levels, you want to go to the regular candles. So like the regular candles, this looks like a strong support being held. If you go to the Heiken Ashis, it doesn't look like it's being held as much. So if you're trying to be exact, you do not want to use Heiken Ashis. You want to go back to the regular candles. So regular candles right now are pretty bullish, holding on to that support. The Heiken Ashi candles will distort price because they're average candles. They're not exact. That's why it's not recommended to use Heiken Ashis on a higher time frame. If you do use them on higher time frames, you need to be comparing them to the regular candles basically at all times. Like for example, if we look at the daily on ES, the Heiken Ashi, the regular price is 45.82. The Heiken Ashi price is 45.48. That is a massive discrepancy. The discrepancy of what? Almost 40 points. Which is untradeable. You cannot trade that. You can use it for like kind of an indicator of the trend, but you cannot trade it. Heiken Ashis are not that bad on low time frames because the price discrepancy is very small. But on higher time frames, they're nearly untradeable. So notice The regular price on this is 45.80. The Heiken Ashi is 45.81. They're 1 point different, which is tradable. That's not a big deal. That's why a lot of people tell you, who are Heiken Ashi traders, they'll tell you to use Heiken Ashi as an indicator, not as an actual price chart. What do I think about Mara? Let's take a look. Looks very weak. Rejecting the daily pivot, rejecting the 50 on the daily. You do have a pivot at 42, almost 43. That's probably where you're headed. Not a whole lot of support in between here and there. If you reclaim the pivot, you could go for 57. But in the meantime, you're looking pretty bad. This is doing my max pain scenario so far. We talked about it yesterday on stream. My max pain scenario would be bounce it off the 50, make people think that this is just like every other time in the year, in the past 2 years, that we've tested the 50, lull them into this like sense of security, and then absolutely nuke them. And so far, that's what's happening. But we have to see how it reacts on the next sell-off. If the next sell-off stays above the 50, then max pain is not going to happen. But I'd say like within 5 trading days, so today's Thursday, I'd say like by Wednesday. If they can put in a new low by Wednesday, or at least very close to a new low, I think you're in for a max pain all the way down to like 4,300. But if the bulls can keep control of the 50-day by Tuesday, Wednesday, I think this is an actual bottom and they should be okay. In the meantime, my trading strategy is still the same. Scalping very small time frames, or taking or loading up my bags on my very long time frames. I think anything in the midterm, anything in the short swing trade, like 5 to 7 days, is just not worth trading right now. It's too choppy. After a few live tests of not trading, I have been testing my new strategy with actually trading. And it's going fairly well. I only took one trade today. I missed this one, which was actually the bigger trade. I got this one here, the first trade of the day. But so far, so good. I've been posting examples of this strategy in the Trading Bot channel if you guys want to follow along. I'm not posting my trades, but I am posting the examples. And there have been like about 20 examples in the past few days. So you guys have a lot of different pictures in there to kind of give you an idea of what I'm looking at. Some of you guys have messaged me already and said you're testing it out on Bitcoin. So I do appreciate you guys giving that a little test. I'm only testing on ES right now. But I know Nix in Discord said he was testing on Bitcoin and that it was going well. The 3-minute on Bitcoin is very good. Johnny in Discord used to talk about how the 3-minute sells would lead to massive sell-offs. All right, let's take a look at this. Regular candles are now selling off. So if you're looking for a sell, this is not a part of the strategy, but this is starting to look a little weak. Looks like it could pull back to VWAP. That'd be a pretty nasty drop though. 26-point drop. I don't know if we have that in us, to be honest. I don't know if the volume is there for that. There's a lot of support right here. You can see we topped out topped out and then bottomed out. So there's a lot of action right here. Be very hard to push through that and get to VWAP. You guys in Discord were asking about my setup. Basically what I'm using right now is the 3-day VWAP indicator. I have 2 of them set up on my chart. One of them is set up on a 2 standard deviation, which is the dotted line here. And then one of them is set up on the 3 standard deviation. They're both set to the daily. I'm not really taking into account the bands. They're just there for visual assistance. As far as the strategy goes, it's extremely simple. It's just using the 3-minute Heiken Ashi buy and sell signals on the bot combined with VWAP. So whenever the buy signals are being supported by VWAP or the sell signals are being supported by VWAP, that's when you would take the trades. For example, today you got a buy signal, which if you would have taken the buy signal, you would have gotten a better entry. But if you waited for the proper setup, you would have waited for VWAP to be supporting you. So once we broke through VWAP, that was your entry. And then it gave you about 40 points, which is disgusting. 40 points is absurdly high for scalping. You could easily get 10 to 15 points and be happy. Same thing here. You were bouncing off VWAP, gave a buy signal, so they're supporting each other. So you could have taken that signal as well, and that gave you about 41 to 45 points max, obviously, if you had the maximum trade. So like I said, 10 to 15 points, fairly easy. You could have gotten faked out on this one, so this might have been a small loss, depending on where you entered, because you were being supported by VWAP. So you had the sell signal, you broke VWAP, so you could have taken this as a sell. If you would have went for 10 points, you would have had to have a perfect entry, and you could have gotten your 10 points. It gave you 13 points. Worst case scenario, you would have taken this trade, not gotten out, and then probably closed it for break even or a very small loss. Maybe about a 5-point loss. So no big deal there. But that was all the signals for today because these are too far away from VWAP. So these don't count. You would have ignored that, you would have ignored that, and you would have ignored that. The trades that you want to take with the strategy, you want to be very close to VWAP. You want it to either be signaling and then breaking VWAP or bouncing and then signaling. So like bouncing off VWAP and then signaling. Those are the 2 entries right now. How's oil looking? Oil looks pretty good. They were actually going up today thanks to OPEC saying that they were going to increase the supply, which is funny because typically when OPEC says they're going to increase the supply, it's actually bad for oil. But I think because the demand is so high across the world that increasing the supply right now is actually a good thing. I actually have a headline here. Let me find it. As oil prices trade up after OPEC Plus sticks to the plan for the production increase of 400,000 barrels per day in January. So the production increase of 400,000 is helping it go higher. But yeah, you did bounce off the 200, which is really clean. Oh, you actually failed it. So you bounced off it and then failed. This is actually not where I would want it to be just yet. You need to bounce back above the 200, above 69 to 70, and that would look a lot better. You are bouncing off the pivot, though, so that is pretty clean. But the 200 EMA you are not bouncing off of. I think it's bouncing off the 200 SMA. Let me see. Is it just called moving average? I always forget. Here we go. No, so you lost the 200 on on the SMA as well. So when they reclaim the 200, that will look a lot better. You do have a very small bull div coming in on the daily. So this low to this low is exaggerated. It should not be failing that much. You are bouncing off the 50 on the weekly, which is really good. Hey, Rudy, what's going on? Hey, Maples, you said I talked about overstock a few times. Sorry, I talked about overstock a couple days ago. Could you take a look at how the retrace is going? Let's take a look. The retrace is getting a little bearish. So you wanted to bounce off this triangle. You are not bouncing. I'm waiting for the weekly close. So we have one more day on the weekly close. If this bounces and closes above the triangle, I might pick up some shares here. But if you close inside the triangle, I'm not really interested just yet. This is a weekly chart, so I'm waiting for the weekly close. Hey, Jonathan, sorry, I missed your message. He said, is the downtrend in volume on Bitcoin weekly since the May pullback concerning? Let me see. Do I have volume on one of these? I think it's on this one. Did you say on the weekly? Let me see. Yeah, on the Bitcoin weekly. Since May. I don't really see a downtrend in volume, to be honest, since May. I see a spike in volume. We had a little bit of a low volume here, but low volume is very typical during accumulation and distribution. So we were accumulating here. So the low volume is not concerning. And then we were impulsing and the volume was spiking. So this is actually very good. And now we're pulling back and distributing, and now the volume is low. So this is very standard. And this is on FTX. I can go to like Coinbase and we can take a look if it's the same. Okay, so Coinbase is a little different. So Coinbase, it is what you were talking about. You do have a little bit of a decrease in volume. So that is a little concerning on the spot exchange for sure. It seems like the spot volume during this impulse, people were not buying very much spot. But if you look at futures, perpetuals, people were trading the shit out of perpetuals. So yeah, that's actually a good point. The spot volume is pretty low. You're not wrong. What's another spot exchange that does a lot of volume? Binance has spot, don't they? Yeah, so even Binance has a... Look at that wick. Jesus Christ. That was that scam wick on Binance all the way down. Look at where it bounced. Bounced off the weekly pivot. But yeah, it looks like the spot exchanges are actually not getting that much volume. You're not wrong at all. I'm gonna bring that up to Sticky and Diamond, see what they think, because they trade. They know a lot more about like the spot to perpetual difference than I do. But I'll bring that up to them and I'll see what they say. You definitely didn't have a lack in volume on perpetuals. People were trading the hell out of perpetuals recently. Maybe it goes to show you that people are not very comfortable loading up their bags for long term on spot right now, but they're comfortable taking short term perpetual trades, which I kind of feel the same way. Am I watching utilities? No, I don't really keep track of utilities. They don't really correlate with anything that I trade. Yeah, but even then, Raphael, people still trade spot very heavily, and we've seen a massive influx of new users on Coinbase, even things like Square, PayPal, all these other programs that allow people to um, buy spot crypto. So the amount of people that are getting into crypto is going up year over year. So the volume should be increasing steadily, at least in times that we're seeing impulses, right? So if you see the spot volume decreasing rapidly during an impulse, that's not very good. Can I take a look at ZEE? Zero swap? Let's see, what is this? Looks like it's nuking the past few days, getting shit on. Doesn't look too good. Usually charts that look like this are not very good projects. Had a very big pump, nuked off, accumulated. The people who accumulated for a very long time got one little exit pump, and now it's nuking again. This is a very typical crypto pattern. You have your initial run, nukes into oblivion, people buy it up and accumulate it. You have one more run, and then it bleeds out. Bounced off that pivot beautifully to the tick. You lost the 618 here. You're losing this pivot. It's losing every support. There's like no support that it's bouncing off of. You tried to bounce here, had a nice little move, failed the pivot, and now we're failing the pivot again. So if it can't bounce off this pivot, probably going to go back down to like 24 cents. If it can hold the pivot, maybe you get back to the 618 or the 50, but not a very good chart. Really nice close on ES if we close like this. It's holding on to that support too. This is why we ignore these signals, because you're consolidating. It's just a nasty distribution. You don't have an edge here. You have an edge when it's using VWAP as support. That's not MACD, Dev. That's the Momo. And I have a video on that. If you go to my indicators playlist, it's the DBT Momo videos. I think there's 2 videos on there. I took a lot of inspiration from how the MACD looked. It doesn't use any of the same formulations, but I knew that the MACD is like one of the most used indicators in the world. Excuse me. So I wanted to make the Momo look like the MACD, make it kind of similar. So that's why it looks like that. The Momo used to be very ugly back in the day, if you guys remember. It used to be like 2 lines. There was a bunch of different shading and circles and all kinds of shit. And I slowly just refined it into what it is now. And it's the cleanest it's ever been, for sure. J-Man, you said an alt that looks good right now is Matic. Take a look. Short-term bouncing off VWAP, not too bad. So it looks like Matic continued that downtrend. We charted this out, continued the downtrend, bounced right off that pivot. So if I remember correctly from what we talked about when I charted this, we were talking about how it was downtrending, and you had 2 options. You're either going to break the downtrend, push to the pivot, or you're going to follow the downtrend down to this pivot. And then you could either break the pivot, go to the 200, or you're going to bounce off the pivot and then retrace. And that's exactly what it's doing. It's bouncing off the pivot, and retracing. Let me clean this up a little bit. You could take this a few different ways. You have like the really tight trend there, and then you have kind of the longer trend there. Followed the bearish channel to the pivot, double bounce off the pivot, and now we're pushing higher. Yeah, it doesn't look too bad. If it gets above this high and holds above that high, you would be looking for 244. See if SPY can get out of this little chop that it's in. Dollar had a nice little move today. Snow is on fire, up 15.5. Chinese EVs not doing too good even after great deliveries, probably because of the Chinese news that came out today. They're still talking about that, the regulations for delisting Chinese companies. Nice move on Bitcoin, bouncing off VWAP, pushing into the upper VWAP band. Really nice accumulation on Facebook. You can see the last 2 days have been nothing but selling off below VWAP. And now we're actually ranging, breaking above VWAP into the close. You can notice Apple's pretty strong today because you're consolidating above VWAP right into the second deviation. The buyers are keeping it in this this more bullish zone. You haven't filled the gap yet. The gap would be 164.25 or 164.50. For SPY, let me take a look. Yeah, we're hitting the 200 EMA on the 5-minute. We're really close to the 30-minute 200 as well. Or no, actually, we're close to the 30-minute 50. 30-minute 50, and then the 30-minute 200. We really need to reclaim this 200. It's putting in one of those stair-stepping patterns with the pivots. Pivot, break, all the way down. Pivot, break. But now we're actually getting a little bullish because we reclaimed this pivot. So we finally put in a pivot, and then we reclaimed an old pivot. That's pretty good. Problem is, notice the 30-minute, the OTS was not able to turn green. Turned gray. The buyers are not in control here. On the 30-minute, they're still struggling. Where's the anchored VWAP? This works better on ES. If you take an anchored VWAP on ES from where we started selling off, that's usually a good indicator. Yeah, so if you take the anchored VWAP from where we started selling off, it's all the way up at 4622. So if we reclaim that and put in like a higher low above that, that usually means the downtrend's over. But that's a long way to go. This still is one of the cleanest bulldogs I've ever seen. So this very well could be the bottom. This is a 4 pivot bulldog. You have a pivot on every single section. So a bulldog has 4 sections, right? You have the first bottom, you have the back, second bottom, and then you have the head. We have a pivot on every section, showing that the buyers and sellers were battling beautifully on every single section, giving you those key points and points of support and resistance, which now all 4 of them are support. If I had to pick like anything to fuel my bullish bias, it would be this bulldog here. I like the bulldog more than I like the daily pivot, more than I like the daily 50. We got a new buy signal coming in. This would also not be a part of the strategy. Too far away from VWAP. VWAP kind of helps you manage your risk. And if you took the buy here, it's too far away. It's 33 points away. Like if you took the trade here, you could put your stop loss below VWAP and it would protect you. It's not going to protect you here. You could take the trade, but it's just not as strong of a trade. How's the regular candles look? Yeah, it's a nice little breakout on the regular candles as well. NASDAQ hitting the second deviation. Hey, Tim, you said, what do you think about Disney puts for a month or so out? Let me take a look. Taking puts here is a little risky because you're already so extended. Like, obviously, you would have wanted to take puts when we broke the major support. So either like back here or even like right here. This is very extended. You're also sitting on a lot of support. So yes, you could take puts here. They could pay off if it continues this nasty downtrend, but the odds are against you here because it's a late entry. Like this is where you wanted to take the puts and you're already well in profit, right? So taking them down here is a little A little skeptical. I think maybe if we got like a bounce and then started to fail, gave you some kind of like late signal, then you could take some puts. Taking puts here is a little scary. Yeah, you're also bouncing beautifully off the weekly 200. Weekly pivot. This is a really clean weekly if it closes like this. Little dragonfly candle. It could start a bear flag. That's exactly what I was just talking about. Is like pull back and then start to put in that little flag. But taking it here, you're anticipating too much. You know what I mean? Hey man, what's going on? You said, do I think Bitcoin is the bottom in or eventually a little bit more downside? Let me take a look. I don't think the bottom is in until we flip the trail and we flip it green, right? So it's red right now. We need to reclaim the trail and then flip the trail green. It's going to be laggy, right? You're not going to catch the bottom, but you don't need to catch the bottom. Almost every time it flips green, it goes on a massive run. Um, if I was trying to bottom catch, I would not be bottom catching here. I'd be bottom catching anywhere from 52.7 to 48.7. That's a bottom catch area. This is not. There's not enough key support here. There is a big level. It's that same level we've been talking about for weeks. That 55.8. It is a very big support it's holding. But I don't know if it's strong enough to try to bottom catch here and put in like a really tight stop. Personally, I'm not going to start loading up my bags until we get in that area right there. What is this retrace? I know my chart's really messy here. Let's go to this other one. If we took this as a fib, this is a 50% retrace. So it's actually in the buy zone. So this would be the buy zone of this pullback. Anywhere from 54.3 to 50,800. And you are bouncing right out of that. But even then, you'd want to be bottoming. You would want to bottom catch down here, not right here. Little too high. Unless you're okay with the drawdown. That's a lot of drawdown. nasty sell-off happening here on the 1 minute. The daily pivot, I'd say it's probably locked in. You only have an hour left on the ES daily. Pretty sure it would have to close like that. Other example of why we don't trade this far away from VWAP. You lose your edge. All of these signals are just too choppy. Could you have gotten in and gotten a few points? Probably, but not worth the risk. All right, new sell signal coming in, still in that choppy range, so you can't really trust it. But if it does work out, most likely going to go down to VWAP. Problem is, market closes in 5 minutes, so this is the last move it's going to get. Hey, Jacob, what's going on? The difference between like these little sell-offs that we see compared to like what we were showing yesterday is my scanners are still going off, like for the buyers, right? Like I've got high days scans going off, I've got bounce scans going off, I've got breakout scans going off. So even though the index is pulling back slightly here, it's not like the entire market is bleeding out. Like yesterday, or was it? It was yesterday, right? Yeah, yesterday. Everything was bleeding. Everything. My scanners were dead because all my scanners are based on bullish momentum. They weren't moving at all. And then we had the low a day scanner just popping off. Neo puts, it's hard to take puts on Neo because they just had really good deliveries. Did they have earnings yet? Yeah, they had good earnings and good deliveries. I think they're nuking mainly on the China stock ban news. If you guys remember, it was like last year, right when the COVID pandemic started, the House was pushing forward this big ass legislation about Chinese stocks trading on the U.S. market, and they were basically saying that if their accounting practices were not to the standards that we wanted them to be, they were going to be delisted because of what happened with Luckin Coffee. Luckin Coffee was faking all their reports. They were listed on the US stock exchange, and then they completely fucking destroyed all the investors. So today they just pushed forward news that they're basically still looking into that, and they're still pushing forward those regulations. So now Chinese stocks are taking a little dive. One of the main reasons I hate trading Chinese stocks, they're extremely volatile. They're very sensitive to news, more so than regular stocks. It sucks because it seems like NEO, XPEV, Lee Automotive, it seems like they're good companies. They're doing very well delivery wise. They're doing very well year over year growth. They're doing very well revenue wise. But that's what we think, right? If they're bullshitting their records, then we don't know. We're screwed. Jacob, it's hard to tell if the market's going to get better at this point. You have to give it at least a day or two to see if this is a dead cat bounce or not. Dead cat bounces are extremely hard to predict. You have to take it day by day. And we did a good job of predicting the last dead cat bounce, the one that happened right here. We could do the same thing for this one. Like if we wanted to, let me go to another chart. If we wanted to, we could go like this, and we could do the same exact thing, and look, it's topping out perfectly again. So that little technique that I showed you guys on how to find dead cat bounces, you take those nasty sell-off candles, you do a Fibonacci tool, you find where your golden pocket is, like that golden ratio to 50% level. And if you cannot break above those levels, then it's a dead cat bounce. So if we look at this one here, you take this candle, and then this bounce was a dead cat bounce. So now if we take this candle, technically this is still a dead cat bounce, this candle right here. So this is not anywhere near being safe just yet. Now, if tomorrow we bounce above this 45.93 and we start pushing into like 46.50, that's starting to look a lot better. And then if we finally reclaim that 618, which is right around that same level, 45.64, then this downtrend is completely smashed and the bulls are in control. And then we should be seeing a nice little breakout. This is more of a market that you want to be reacting, not predicting. Like you can try to predict these daily candles and seeing if they're a dead cat bounce or not. And it is working to a certain extent. But if you're taking like, say, weekly contracts or something like that, and you're wrong by one day, your contracts are going to get obliterated. So it's best to take it day by day and take little scalps here and there and not trying to predict the overall move. 59 minutes until this daily pivot closes. Now that the market is closed, it's pretty much guaranteed to close a pivot. This will be the first blue pivot that we've had since the COVID low. Now, the COVID pivot is not a good comparison because this put in a pivot and found a bottom, but then it nuked. So if you're seeing this pivot come in, you think like this is the savior. That's not what it means. We don't know if that pivot is going to be a bottom pivot or a ladder pivot until it's tested, right? So you're not out of it just yet. But all right, guys, I'm going to call it on that. Appreciate you guys being here. I will be doing another morning call tomorrow. Make sure you guys stop by. The morning call this morning went a lot better than yesterday. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I'll try to slow it down like I did today and keep it nice and clean. That will start at 9 a.m. as always. Then we'll start our normal daily activities in the trading floor at 9:30. I'm going to be posting the analysis later tonight, so make sure you keep an eye on that. Same with yesterday. There's really not a whole lot on my watch list right now. I'm waiting to see what SPY and Qs are going to do before I start loading up on my watch list. So the analysis is probably going to be a little slim, but regardless, you guys should definitely check it out. I'm going to be posting it later. And for you guys on stream, I'll see you guys tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern. Tim, you said, what's my opinion on volume profile? Go take a look at my How to Trade playlist. I've got tons of videos on volume profile on there. At this point, I am probably the most watched volume profile streamer on YouTube. So that's my opinion. Go check out those videos. They'll help you out a lot. But all right, guys. You guys have a good day. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.